Join the Betamax Video Club, rewinding back to our favourite films of the 1980s. My name's Rich Nelson, and tonight I've rented Spaceballs. Watching it with me is Becky Lee. Hi Becky, how are you?
Hello, I'm good, thanks. How are you?
I'm very good. Thank you for bringing your copy of Spaceballs from Mr. Rental. This is we're actually watching the film after it's finished, so we can talk about the whole thing. What's so special about Spaceballs for you?
Well, my family have a lifelong history with Mel Brooks films. I think it was Blazing Saddles was the first one that we were allowed to see. I had a good parents' evening or something, and I was allowed to watch Blazing Saddles as a treat. And then sort of everyone followed on. But Spaceballs is the one that me and my brothers have watched most often between us, and I think it's probably the one that we quote like in regular conversation a lot. So it's just one of those films that's just always been around.
Yeah, I think this is one that I guess my parents weren't massively into Mel Brooks films. I think Blazing Saddles was about the only one that I vaguely remember seeing or having in the background as a kid, and being a massive Star Wars fan, seeing anything, and even at the time I probably wasn't old enough to acknowledge a parody or a piss take or anything like that, but seeing this and actually laughing while watching it, even though obviously so many of the jokes I wouldn't get until I was a lot older. You know, as parodies go, I mean, it's certainly the only Star Wars one I think I've enjoyed watching. There's a lot. I mean, I know, you know, it's more of a Star Trek thing, I suppose. Galaxy Quest would be an equivalent for Star Trek, I suppose. But I never saw that once, and I wasn't really into people who listen to the Star Trek episode. I'm not a huge Star Trek fan, but I mean, this for me, I suppose, was so perfect. It had Rick Moranis, who I think at the time, John Candy, who at the time, you know, couldn't do any wrong in my eyes.
Yes.
Everything revolving around Dark Helmet, which is probably a joke in itself.
Yeah. Yes. I think. Again, it was one of the "you went over my helmet" quotes we used to use a lot if someone sort of bypassed the regular traditions.
I mean, the film opens, you know, very much in the Star Wars mould. It's got the opening text, the crawl, essentially explaining the whole plot. You know, so there's not too many to give away, but it's talking about Princess Vesper's wedding day and the Spaceballs being this. You know, you quite quickly see throughout the film they're certainly not ruthless.
And slightly inept at all.
Yeah. And the one bit I do remember from the end, which I always half picture every time I see a Star Wars film now, is the bit where it says, "If you can read this, you don't need glasses" at the end.
Yes.
Small print.
Yes, that always the bit that I noticed this time was the unbeknownst to the princess, but knownst to us, and that really made me giggle even before we got to the glasses bit this time.
Everything in there, I suppose, is like most things, but you kind of see it when you watch it differently. Everything is there with a purpose. I suppose it's like the equivalent of when we rewatched Airplane for an episode before, and you kind of see all these little bits that you might need to have watched it 10 or 15 times before you really notice.
Yes, and they're always like the little bits as well that like the little wordplay bits. I think that's the bit that I noticed the most this time around, was all the little puns. I mean, the jamming the radar, which I'm sure we'll get to later, is just a classic, but there's lots of little things, and you know, if you can read this, you don't need glasses. And then again, when you get to the ship and the bumper sticker, "We break for nobody," is just all those little like visual cues that you pick up on.
Yeah, I always wanted a bumper sticker like that for my car, but could never find one.
Yeah.
One thing I think I definitely missed as a kid, I say kid, I was probably 9 or 10 when I watched this the first time, was the opening with the ship, this huge long ship, and I always thought, oh yeah, it's like the one from Star Wars at the beginning. And it's only when I was older and I actually watched Alien that I think, you know, that was clearly more the rip-off of that.
Yes. Yeah, with the shape and the sort of the outward like texture of it.
Yeah, or I suppose Red Dwarf would be of a similar time. But
yes.
One thing I guess, and maybe this is the benefit of not watching something off the telly of the 80s or on a VHS or Betamax, is that watching it in HD, you can see how much detail went into the model. And doing some reading, it's normally Wikipedia and IMDb, but looking at some of the background into this, you realise how much, I say involvement, but how much assistance Mel Brooks was given by George Lucas.
Yes.
That's surprising.
It was, yeah. It's not something I realised until I'd done a bit of reading into the podcast, into the film. Until today, I was sat reading it, and like all the industrial like magic effects that they were allowed to use, and the sound effects and things, and the fact that George Lucas loved it so much, he pretty much gave Mel Brooks free rein, which I love. I think that's so good to know about that sort of relationship between two filmmakers.
Yeah, and I guess it kind of paints George Lucas in a light that, I mean, it's difficult to say now. You know, we're talking in 2020, and Star Wars is very much a Disney beast now, but at the time it was all his. And we were sort of just off the back, I think, when I did the Ewok movies, that was 84, 85. And it's hard to tell, you know, do you think George Lucas had much of a sense of humour? I mean, he obviously did.
Yeah, I think because there's a quote from him, isn't it, that said like he didn't stop laughing for the entire movie, which I think like I think Spaceballs has a reputation as one of sort of Mel Brooks' lesser films, especially when you compare it to something like Young Frankenstein or Blazing Saddles. But I love the idea of George Lucas sat watching the film and just giggling at all the things that were taking the mick out of his franchise.
Yeah, and they were mostly done with sort of love, I suppose, as well.
Yeah.
I mean, was it George Lucas' only condition on it was you can't sell any merchandise?
Yes.
Which, having only just realised this a couple of years ago, I think it kind of put something to bed in my brain that I was always the flamethrower.
It seems like the perfect tie-in, doesn't it? That they set it all up for you until after the movie. But yeah, I always wanted Spaceballs the bedsheet. I always thought that was the coolest thing.
Yeah, I suppose it's slightly ruined by the fact that President Scrooge is using it while with two blonde ladies.
Yes, my poor innocent brain didn't connect the two things when I was a kid.
I think I've still got my original A-Team duvet cover from when I was a kid.
Oh, amazing.
Still not quite as good as the Spaceballs one. The first sort of interaction we have with any characters here is
Colonel Sanders,
and played so straight as well. Like the only reference is the Colonel Sanders chicken line, and I love the fact that it's just dropped in there initially and nothing's done with it. You just expected to pick up on it.
I saw your tweet on it earlier, and I just thought, you know, this is. It's one of those where you don't want to make too much of a meal of it. Everyone knows the joke. The joke's in front of you, but don't milk it too much. But
I was just going to say, I think that's one thing that Brooks does really well in this one, is that there are a lot of running jokes, but in his later films he tends to milk them a bit too much. But I think in Spaceballs he definitely sort of, there's enough reining in so it doesn't quite get old before the end of the film.
Yeah, touched upon earlier, you know, Mel Brooks has this, you know, astounding CV of movies, and it seems almost cheap to pick this. I mean, this is the main 80s one, I guess, but this is the one that I cling to more than, you know, even though I've seen Blazing Saddles several times and it is a better film. I think it's just the fact that this was my film when I was a kid, in the way that probably not many kids watched Blazing Saddles, and certainly not in my household, and I guess they wouldn't have been showing this on a Saturday afternoon on BBC Two.
Yes, and I think as well it's got that sort of childish accessibility to it, because it's Star Wars, but it's parodying, you know, with Blazing Saddles. If you didn't watch westerns every Sunday with your dad, you're probably not going to pick up on a lot of the references it's making, and same with Young Frankenstein if you're not as familiar with Universal. But I think because it's Star Wars and because there's all sorts of other references in there to things like Star Trek, and the silly jokes as well, like the Colonel Sanders, I think it's one of his most accessible for younger audiences, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about this on other episodes where, you know, my dad used to love John Wayne and Clint Eastwood films, and I don't know, I never really got into them at the time. I did certainly with Clint Eastwood ones later on, but he always said, "Oh, you'll be like this with Star Wars when you're my age," and of course he was right. But you know, and again, it probably was until I started watching those sort of Western films that Blazing Saddles went beyond a funny film with funny jokes and stuff to one that you could really appreciate.
Yes, exactly. And same, like, we watched a lot of westerns when I was growing up, but I think there's such a context around Blazing Saddles. You know, what it did to the western genre, what it was doing for the exploration of African American characters in westerns, all of that kind of thing. There's so much going on with it. Does it make a film? Returning to Spaceballs, I think, like, it's sort of almost the perfect counterpoint to that, in that you don't really need context apart from Star Wars, and it is just a relentlessly silly film.
Yeah.
And, like, gloriously so. I mean, it really revels in the fact that it's completely bonkers and ridiculous, and I think that's what makes it work on that level.
I mean, within about 4 minutes, we've got Dark Helmet's arrival on the scene. And immediately he's got his face mask. He says he can't breathe in this thing, and the lackey, the spaceball, has called the president to let him know. And this is something that again was cut from the TV version that I saw, when Dark Helmet takes the ring out, sticks it on his finger, and the guy goes, "Shit." I didn't see that until I was probably 15.
Oh, yeah.
And then
Yeah.
and then it's like if you were Darth Vader but you had the mind of also Jay from the In-Betweeners, what would you do? You'd shoot lasers at people's balls.
Yes. And I love the fact that it becomes a joke throughout the film. Like, whenever his ring appears, anyone near them covers their crops. Like, doesn't matter what he's doing, whether he's being nice or not. It's just immediately there's that pose where they all, like, protect themselves.
I suppose having that fear over people in some ways isn't a bad thing. Bear in mind it's Rick Moranis under there.
Yes. Yeah. And for all the helmet size, he's no more intimidating, I don't think.
And the whole plot of them arriving at planet Druidia to steal 10,000 years of fresh air. It's mad. Just to steal air from a planet. It's this whole strange concept that, I mean, it's a MacGuffin of some sort, really. It's not a huge... I mean, it's the plot, but it's not particularly relevant. But it's just a machine for all these gags to come in, where they're looking at planet Druidia, and is that it? No, that's Mr. Coffee.
Yeah.
And it's a display of a coffee machine, and then they move to Mr. Radar.
Yes.
Just so weird.
What's the matter with this thing? What's all that churning and bubbling? You call that a radar screen?
No, sir. We call it Mr. Coffee. Care for some?
Yes! I always have coffee when I watch radar. You know that.
Of course I do, sir.
Everybody knows that. Of course we do, sir!
And it's so simple. Like, that. One of the things I noticed particularly is that, like, the humor itself, there's nothing particularly clever going on for the most part. It is just those silly little, like airplane type gags where it's just sort of scattershot, and some land and some don't, for the most part. But like the Mr. Radar thing is, again, when you notice it for the first time, it's hilarious. And I can't put a finger on why, but I find it hilarious every time.
And the fact that they're explaining the plot of taking the 10,000 and then breaking the fourth wall and just going, "You got that?
Yeah.
Good."
Yeah, so you're all clear, right? Yeah.
We haven't forgotten about you, don't worry.
Yeah.
So we cut to Druidia, which is just... I know Mel Brooks has spoken about this, everything is Druish instead of Jewish. It's hardly disguised. And I think one of the quotes I saw was that he said, "It's the thing I'm most ashamed of, and the thing I'm proudest of is that I kept it all in." I mean, it's being not Jewish myself, I guess it's difficult to take a lot of that on board, but I guess it's not very light touched about some of the stereotypes. I was jumping ahead slightly. She gets kidnapped by the Spaceballs in order to get the air, and the dad is just as concerned as his very flashy Mercedes is about to get seized.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's probably a better film, I would guess, to explore Mel Brooks' relationship with his sort of Jewish heritage, because he does it a lot, like the rabbi in Men in Tights. Again, is sort of very stereotypical, but I like that he almost owns it in that way. Like, you can understand why he's ashamed of putting the stereotypes in, but also it's almost undercutting the stereotypes by the fact that he's indulging in them, if that makes sense.
Yeah, he seems to enjoy it, and I think the fact that this plot is giving him license to do so.
Yes.
It's I mean, they are stereotypes, but there's nothing. I guess it's difficult. There's nothing hugely malicious in there. It's just having a bit of fun at the Jewish people's expense that I suppose you'd have to be Mel Brooks to really be able to get away with.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, he's the only one really in a position to be able to do that kind of thing.
And just after the wedding, where Princess Vespa runs away because she doesn't want to marry Prince, she runs off. We're introduced to I suppose the hero of the movie, Lone Star. Very much a Han Solo or Diet Han Solo. It's his flying caravan is advertised as hero for hire.
Yes, and it's Eagle 5 on the number plate, isn't it? And they've got their bumper sticker as well, which that's the I Love Uranus one, isn't it? Which is classic. Not one I wanted to put on my own car, I must admit.
No, I suppose there are probably some cars it would double the value of, but I think it doesn't look out of place on their Winnebago.
No.
Yeah. And we also meet John Candy as Barf, who is Chewbacca, but more like your average dog rather than a Wookiee or anything else. He's basically John Candy in a dog ears and a tail.
Yes. And he's so adorable.
Oh.
Like, he makes a perfect man, dog, mog person.
He's just, I mean, John Candy, I mean, he's great in everything. He's been in a couple of the episodes I've done previously, I guess, Planes, Trains and Automobiles and Splash. And in here he's got so much. I mean, yes, he's not the main character, but he's allowed to be that kind of lovable without dominating too much. He's such a great foil for Lone Star.
Yeah, because they have such a great sort of switch between the straight man and the comic between them. Because Bill Pullman gets his moments to shine comedically, and John Candy's perfectly happy to let him get on with it.
Yeah.
But equally, Pullman knows when to just let Candy loose, and I think they have such a great dynamic between the two of them.
Yeah, and they have that sort of buddy relationship that Han Solo and Chewbacca do as well, but it's slightly more in jest.
Yes, and slightly more untidy, I think, than the Falcon ever was.
They're slovenly pigs, we'll give them that.
Yes.
And we find that they owe Pizza the Hut. It turns out to be 1 million space bucks. Just a nice round number. If you haven't seen Spaceballs, I mean, go and rent it, whatever. But if you haven't, Pizza the Hut is, imagine Jabba the Hutt but made of pizza. That is it.
Yeah. Again, it's one of those simple, really obvious jokes, but just works and is really grotesque as well.
Oh, it's awful. I mean, I'm not a particularly big fan of pizza, so to me it's watching it is just awkward.
It's the way he oozes and like things just drip. Oh, it's great. Things dripping.
Yeah.
It's not very nice.
He's got his henchman Vinny who sits there going, you're delicious.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so creepy. I always wondered if Vinny's the person who ate Pizza the Hut at the end.
Unfair to the payor, but not to the payee. But you're gonna pay it, or else.
Or else what?
Tell him, Vinny.
Or else pizza is gonna send out for you. You're delicious.
Ciao, boys.
We go to Spaceball City where Mel Brooks is playing President Scroob. Scroob is Brooks backwards, of course. He's on the phone to someone. He's having to sniff out of a can of Perrier. Just, again, a quick visual gag that seems to land. It's sort of thing, that's the sort of gag you'd see in an airplane, I think, and
Yes.
I'd quite happily live there.
Yeah, it's a very Zucker type gag.
And this is the big Star Trek gag where they talk about beaming him from one room to another, and they beam him. His head is backwards.
Yeah.
And in the room that he lands, and he's obviously given away completely by the fact his hands are also the wrong way around, so he's literally just put his suit on backwards. But
and padded his bum out.
Yeah, it gives it a good old scratch. And if you think this is the joke, it's not, because it turns out he's just in the room next door.
Yes, yes, which is a lovely build. I
Yeah.
think, like, again, another obvious one. I also really like Snotty, the Scotty stand-in, who counts the Loch 1, Loch 2, Loch 3, Loch Lomond.
And they stick him in a kilt as well, just...
Yeah, and a tam o'shanter, just to make sure that we got it.
Yeah, in case you're not 100% sure of your accents, in case you're worried he might be Irish or something like that.
Yeah. Stick him in some tartan, it'll be fine.
The part where this is where the princess gets kidnapped by the Spaceballs. Again, it's just a silly gag where he says, "Fire a shot across her nose," and you've got a cross-eyed gunner who turns out his name is Asshole, and the person who hired him is his cousin, who is also cross-eyed and also an asshole.
Yes.
And it's just a joke, joke to see how many people can offer their name as asshole.
And it turns out all but one of the bridge, I think. Which is quite, as a family business, it's quite something.
It probably suggests a lot of if they're all cross-eyed as well.
Yeah, it would explain the Spaceballs for sure.
I do love the guy who doesn't put his hand up. He just sits there very sheepish, almost like he's feeling left out.
Yeah, like, oh, I'm not an asshole.
I knew it. I'm surrounded by assholes.
Keep firing, assholes!
So the king, this is where he's as worried about the car as his daughter, and the daughter's handmaiden, which is the closest we get to a droid. It's Dot Matrix, the Joan Rivers voiced C-3PO. I'm not really an expert on Joan Rivers either. I've seen her on stuff, but this was the first and probably the only thing I'd really seen her on until, I think, again, this shows what is on TV in my house sometimes, is those post-Oscars fashion shows. It sounds like I'm bubbling my wife up when I say she watches them, but Joan Rivers, before she died, used to pop up on there, basically either her and Kelly Osbourne loving or loathing the outfits worn on the red carpet. And again, it feels bad that she's seen as this trailblazing female comedian, but I don't really know a lot about her, and maybe it's as much because she's American as anything else.
Yeah, I think she also seems to be one of those that sort of had her very specific niche, like that sort of the kind of nasty woman comedian. Because I've seen some of her stand up. But I must admit, my only real knowledge of Joan Rivers is also Dot Matrix. And I never placed her voice. I never connected the two for years until I saw probably one of those Oscars clip shows, actually, when I was like, oh, it's Dot Matrix. So yes, not something I'm culturally aware of.
Yeah, I guess the thing is that, if you grow up in this country, and especially if you're perhaps a little bit younger, or it's easier these days with the internet and so on, you didn't have access to stuff. I mean, if you're that way inclined, you could watch Saturday Night Live virtually live here now. Whereas before, I mean, it sound like I'm a really old man. We had 4 channels, and wasn't really the thing. But
no,
yeah.
And I think as well because so like John Candy and the 80s comedy scene was so tied into SNL and things like that. There is that sort of slight cultural mismatch when Brits try and watch some of these films. You're trying to match up the sort of sense of humour. Yeah,
because unless they make it big into films, Eddie Murphy's a peak example where he suddenly became this massive film star, and everyone knew who Eddie Murphy was from the a lot of people knew who Eddie Murphy was from the films. And unless you'd seen Saturday Night Live or aware of it in this country, or you were, I suppose, in those circles, you maybe you'd seen him do stand-up or something like that. But that was something that was perhaps missed. And you'd have to hope that you'd see the films and understand who these people were, and if you're lucky, go back and watch some of it in the future.
Yeah.
I mean, there's one joke now, the jamming the radar, which we talked about.
Sorry, it gets me every time.
Unfortunately, it doesn't really work on a podcast. I mean, the gag is as simple as when they say we need to jam the radar, just fire a huge jar of jam at a radar. It's that simple, and it's that funny.
Yeah, and I love the fact that you see the lid bouncing off that says jam. Again, just to make sure you've got that that's what's happening.
There's a big sledgehammer in there somewhere.
Yeah.
And one for other 80s movies fans, you've got Michael Winslow, who's Jones from Police Academy, in a small cameo, just doing what he does best, just lots of random noises.
Yep. And it's another one of my favourite bits where he's speaking into the radio and he's doing the special radio voice, and then Sanders takes it off him and he does the voice again. I love that whole sequence. The whole radar sequence is wonderful, and the fact that the jam leaks down through the screen as well for no apparent reason.
And Dark Helmet realises it's Lone Star because it's raspberry.
Yeah.
It's like they have this history that, I suppose at the time you might think, oh, they've got this huge backstory. Of course, later on, throughout the film, you kind of get that feeling as well. But by the end of it, again, this is no spoiler, the climax at the end is almost like they don't really have any history. They hate each other for no reason.
Yeah, and there is a connection, but Dark Helmet's like his father's brother's friend's roommate or something. I can't remember the full sequence, and that's it. That's the whole connection between the two of them.
And I think that's implied that they are each other. That he is his roommate as they speak.
Yeah.
I think if you go for a family tree, it basically goes into one big circle.
Yes. Yeah.
It's just so odd, but then Barth manages to convince the princess and Dot Matrix to get into the Winnebago. And he got a silly joke, his name's Barth. He introduces himself as Barth.
Yeah.
Don't vomit in here, mister. This is a Mercedes.
Yeah. Mind the upholstery.
So they managed to get her on board, or them on board, and there's the various gags about, she's got her matching luggage. Where he's told that she's a Druish princess, which is probably the most transparent of the Jewish princess jokes.
Yes, and she doesn't look Druish.
And again, you've got the gag where they seize the car. The car gets brought up into the ship, and as soon as he realises she's not in there, everyone covers their crotch and shouts.
Yeah. Yeah, and even Sanders is not immune.
Yeah. And then they got the outline of a Winnebago.
Oh, I love the Winnebago.
So I always think that. I mean, I suppose Winnebago must have had, I don't know whether they provided the vehicles for this or something, but whenever I've seen Winnebagos, which isn't a huge amount, I've always felt disappointed that they don't have wings.
Yes. Exactly the same. Like, yes, but does it go through space? Because otherwise I'm not interested.
Does it have a little ladder that drops down?
Yeah.
And we get to probably the funniest sequence of the film, I think, where the Spaceball 1 is pursuing the Winnebago. Yes.
Yeah.
That one.
That one. Ludicrous speed.
Yeah. Just as they get behind the Winnebago, they take off at light speed. And they say, oh, they've gone to light speed. What have they got on this? A Cuisinart. Which I, again, wasted on young me, but now, I mean, Cuisinart's a brand of small kitchen appliances, I believe.
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
And it goes from... So they go, we're going to have to go right to ludicrous speed. And this is where the what's the matter, Colonel Sanders joke comes in.
Chicken.
Prepare ship for light speed.
No, light speed is too slow.
Light speed too slow?
Yes, we're gonna have to go right to ludicrous speed.
Ludicrous speed? Sir, we've never gone that fast before. I don't know if the ship can take it.
What's the matter, Colonel Sanders? Chicken?
Yes, it's such a great line, and the name, like, it had to be, they had to make something of it somewhere, but I think the way Rick Moranis delivers it is just, it's so perfect, because it is that sort of playground taunt rather than a commander speaking to his underling. It's, peer pressure more than anything.
And you kind of get a couple of jokes to emphasise the scale of Spaceball 1, where it's talking about close all shops in the mall and cancel the circus. And one of my favourite bits was said, hadn't you better buckle up? And he goes, buckle this.
Yeah.
It's not a funny joke, except it's mostly the way he says it.
Yeah, it's all in the delivery. Yeah.
Ludicrous speed!
Sir, hadn't you better buckle up?
Now buckle this!
And it goes from light speed to ridiculous speed to ludicrous speed, which is as stupid as you think it is.
Yeah. And then they go to Plaid.
Yeah, and they go so far past him.
Yeah, they overshoot them by a week and a half or something. And so something that I spotted this today was that Elon Musk used light speed, ridiculous speed, and ludicrous speed for Tesla acceleration modes, which I think is it's the bizarrest connection. But so that's a little tidbit for everyone.
So if you ever get a Tesla, it'll have ludicrous speed.
Apparently so,
superb.
and it even has a Plaid mode.
Oh, you should use that more in marketing. People might actually get one.
Yeah, you'd think, wouldn't they? I mean, I'd certainly be tempted. If you could get it in a Winnebago shape, I'm there.
I'll go for a test drive next time I need a new car. Just to go to ludicrous speed down the A3. Yeah, yeah. I know I'll still get stuck in traffic, but it'd be funny. I'd laugh. And because he gets frustrated, they go past the Winnebago. They have to use an emergency stop brake, which stops everything. And the hilarious sight of him flying into a panel helmet first.
Yeah. And when he gets up as well, I love that he turns into his Ghostbusters character for just the briefest period.
That's what I wrote down. He's basically the pre-Keymaster.
Yes, yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's sort of meek and mild with a very flat helmet all of a sudden.
And it sounds horrible. I watched this last night and I saw that bit where he's holding on to the bar while this is at ludicrous speed. He's basically looks like he's flying, and his face is contorted like it's the G-force. And all of a sudden, because it stops, he goes flying. And I kind of said, that looks a bit like if my 3-year-old did that. The way he kind of just flies head first into something. And then, he stands up with his helmet's been flattened, and he says, "Oh, why don't we take a 5-minute break?" He just
How are you today?
becomes so meek.
Yeah.
Rick.
And again, Rick Moranis, he's perfect. Like the whole switch that he does for that one, it's great.
This is the first film I've done that he's been in, and I suppose it was only, at the time of recording, I think it was about 2 or 3 weeks ago, it emerged that he's come out of his retirement.
Yeah.
And that's great news.
It is, yeah, it is. I think he's one of those just sort of instantly kind of friendly, comforting presences in a film. It would be really nice to have him back, especially if they do make Spaceballs 2, The Search for More Money.
One day, hopefully.
Which I know they've talked about, which would be hilarious. Yeah. But yeah, it would be really good to have him back in things again. Hopefully it won't just be a one-off.
Yeah, because I think that the original idea is that he's meant to be in a remake or a reboot of Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, which sounds awful. I have no beef for that film, but it feels almost like he's being wasted.
Yes, I know what you mean. Like, of all of his characters to bring back, it's probably not the first one I would have picked. But
no, unless it's just some elaborate way to shoehorn him into the new Ghostbusters film.
Yeah, like a sort of backdoor type thing.
Well, why don't we take a 5-minute break?
Very good, sir.
Smoke if you got 'em.
So the Winnebago crashes onto the sand planet, which is essentially Tatooine, and they get all the marching across the dunes, and it turns out that all the essential luggage that the princess has brought with her is essentially a giant hairdryer.
Industrial strength, which you probably need for that 80s feathering, don't you? Like to really get the volume going.
Yeah, but Bill Pullman had an impressive set of hair.
He did, yeah. It's a proper mop going on, isn't it?
Yeah, it's very shiny and well kept. But,
yeah, for a Winnebago bum.
I suppose this and Independence Day are the two sort of things I remember him for. I know he's in that one where he fall asleep with Sandra Bullock while she was in a coma.
Yeah, while you were sleeping. It's one of my favourite films. No, he's the brother. Peter Gallagher is the one in a coma, and
right, okay.
Bill Pullman plays his brother.
Oh, thank God.
Yeah, no, he's the good guy. It's fine.
Okay, I didn't want to slag it off. It was your favourite film, but
one of them. Yeah, no,
okay.
it's lovely. definitely recommend it.
Yeah. I'm trying to think. He in Independence Day when he flew the plane. Wasn't that Eagle 5 or didn't it have a call sign?
Oh, it's Eagle One.
Oh, was it Eagle 1? Okay.
Eagle One, yeah, yeah.
Oh, that would have
I'd
been.
love it if that was a reference, but maybe too much of a coincidence.
Yes. As they're marooned on this sand planet, the Spaceballs are frantically looking for where our gallant heroes have gone to. And this is another one of those gags that just works perfectly for the time.
Yeah.
How to find the heroes in Spaceballs the movie? Well, of course, we watched a video of Spaceballs the movie.
How can there be a cassette of Spaceballs the movie? We're still in the middle of making it.
Oh, that's true, sir. But there's been a new breakthrough in home video marketing.
Yes?
Yes, instant cassettes. They're out in stores before the movie is finished.
Here it is, sir. Spaceballs.
Which is happening now, and they're
Yes.
watching it then.
But they're watching it now.
Yeah, but now it's then.
Yes. When will then be now?
Soon.
Yes. Again, it's just so silly.
Yeah.
And this is called Mr. Rental. Just to go
Yeah.
Mr. Coffee and Mr. Radar. I mean, the Mr. thing must have been a joke, deliberate thing. I don't know about 80s consumer products. I guess most machines a vending machine would be called Mr. something or other.
Yeah.
And they open this shutter to all these video cassettes that are there, and of course all of Mel Brooks' back catalogues take pride of place.
Yeah, nicely displayed.
Yeah, and as they sort of scroll through them, and Dark Helmet's sceptical, is that how can we watch it? We're still in the middle of making it.
Yeah.
And one thing I didn't realise, I tweeted about this at the time, and again, probably because I was watching it on digital rather than video. I never realised the other videos in the shelves. They had Rocky, and I think it went up to about Rocky 9.
Yeah.
And I think there was it Halloween or something else.
Yeah, there's something else there. I can't remember what it is, but yeah. I
And
remember
just-
the Rockies.
Yeah, and I just kind of think like that's the detail that goes into these visual gags. Even, I suppose, if you'd seen it at the cinema, you might have seen it because it's on the big screen in fairly. It should be fairly clear, but watching it at home on a 14-inch rented TV, not quite the same thing.
No.
And of course, when they fast forward through the film to get to the point they need to see, and it just happens to land directly on where they are.
Yeah.
It's a cheap gag, but God, it's hilarious.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that sums up the film, really, doesn't it? But I love it when they're doing all the tests. Like you can see them turning round and turning back, and it's all perfectly timed.
And then they find all they have to do is fast forward a little bit just to work out exactly where they are.
Yeah.
You get a Dark Helmet so out the loop when they say, "We'll have them tomorrow." Oh.
Yeah. And doesn't his helmet fall down at that point as well?
When will then be now? Soon.
Yeah.
Oh, if only Darth Vader had that comic timing.
Exactly. Yes, Star Wars would have been very different. Probably
Yes.
less scary for a 3-year-old, but
Oh, blimey, yeah. Yeah, I mean, my 3-year-old, she's got some Star Wars merchandise. Maybe I should stick her in front of Spaceballs and see if she finds it funny.
I bet there will be some gags that land for sure.
Yeah, there'll be something, I'm sure.
Yeah.
We'll try it. So back on the desert planet, we've got they've set up a camp for the night, and Vesper and Lone Star start getting a bit, I would say, close. It's probably the term for it. And there's silly gags in there about where are you from? Somewhere in the Ford Galaxy.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Silly.
It's very silly.
Yeah.
Still funny.
And again, I probably wasted on young me. I don't know how advanced I was, but when just as they're about to kiss, the virgin alarm goes off.
Yes. Yes. Definitely something I missed. Because they do it again in Men in Tights, don't they? They repeat the joke with the chastity belt. And I remember watching Men in Tights back, and when I was a bit older, and just going, oh, that's what that's about. And then watching Spaceballs and being like, oh, I get it now. Just that light bulb goes off in your brain, and you're like, oh, yeah, there we are.
And the other gag was it's programmed to go off before you do.
Yeah.
He called him a sex fiend.
Yes. Like, all right.
Now, they are, the next day, walking through the desert, and they all faint, and this shows that Bath and Lone Star want water. They just go, water, and the princess says room service.
Yes.
Yeah, same thing.
Yeah.
I obviously acknowledged but didn't appreciate so much was as the Spaceballs land on the planet, Dark Helmet is now wearing a safari suit.
Yes, and
Like
the piss helmet.
looking like Roger Moore, just clad in beige.
Yes, and his like absolutely gorgeous knee-high socks as well.
It's just so perfect, and no expense was spared with the special effects. I think with their vehicle, they didn't try and pretend it floated or anything. They just put mirrors around the wheels to reflect the sand.
And it works. I never noticed that until I read about it. I was like, oh, that's clever.
I'm sure it saved them a few quid.
Absolutely.
The heroes are found by, they're called the Dinks, I think.
Yes. Yeah, the Dinks.
Yeah, the sort of budget Jawas.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they're taken to the temple of yogurt. Which
Yes.
Just, yeah. Is Mel Brooks dressed as Yoda?
Yes. Yeah, gold instead of green, isn't he?
Yeah. And he explains the concept of the Schwartz, which, again, Force Schwartz, same thing. I think Bath at one point actually says the Force. He goes, no, the Schwartz.
Yeah. And everyone's like, oh, the Schwartz. Like it's a perfectly ordinary thing. Like, oh yeah, we know about that.
This mystical power. And this is where he says, what do you do here? And this is the merchandising stall. It's just so brilliant.
Yeah, and I love the fact that it's all like, so the lunchbox is a Transformers lunchbox, and you can really clearly see Optimus Prime on it, which I love. Like they basically just slapped a sticker on it and were like, "Yeah, that'll do."
So this is all the stuff. I mean, it goes Spaceballs, the lunchbox, the breakfast cereal, which is 100% sugar.
Yeah.
And the ultimate Spaceballs, the flamethrower.
Yeah, and the kids love that one.
Yeah. I always wanted a Spaceballs flamethrower.
Yeah, it would have been amazing. I mean, dangerous for sure, but
Yeah, well, you lose a few eyebrows, but
Yeah, it'd be worth it.
No harm. We had most of the Star Wars toys. We didn't get a flamethrower, so.
No, exactly.
Walk this way, take a look. We put the picture's name on everything. Merchandising, where the real money from the movie is made. Spaceballs the t-shirt. Spaceballs the coloring book. Spaceballs the lunchbox. Spaceballs the breakfast cereal. Spaceballs the flamethrower. The kids love this one. Last but not least, Spaceballs the doll. Me.
May the Schwartz be with you.
This is the bit that seems to be one of those meme sort of things where they say they've located them and they're trying to track them down, and so the Spaceballs, and they ask President Scrooge what to do. He says, comb the desert. This isn't a subtle gag.
No, not at all.
We cut to Spaceballs with giant combs.
Combing the desert.
Yeah.
It looks like they're trying to make a rock garden.
And then just to rub it in, you've got two black Spaceballs with an afro comb.
Yeah, and also the one who says we ain't found shit, that's Tuvok from Voyager. It's Tim Russ.
Oh, is it?
I love that as a little like Star Trek connection that would be. But yeah, and he gets one of the best lines in the movie. So
it's just so brilliant. It's and even Colonel Sanders is saying to him, "Are we being too literal?"
Yeah.
He says, "No, he told us to comb the desert, so we're combing it."
Yeah, like it's just one of those things. Like that's what we have to do.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Now they managed to convince the princess to come out of Yogurt's hideout by pretending to be the king and luring her out. And Lone Star and Bath leave with, they're given a fortune cookie. And it says, open it before you eat it. And this is the followed by the gag about perhaps we'll meet again in Spaceballs 2, The Search for More Money.
Yeah. Which I would pay to see. Like, if they wanted to crowdfund it, I would be there.
I saw that there was an interview with Mel Brooks in The Guardian quite recently. And I know he's in his 90s now, but you kind of think, surely there must be some unfinished business. I mean, people of all our generation are clamouring for Spaceballs 2.
Especially because they started talking about it when The Force Awakens was announced. Because I remember making the joke to my brother, like, well, maybe now they'll make Spaceballs 2. So it's definitely been like talked about. But if anyone was going to do it, it wouldn't surprise me if Mel Brooks managed it in his 90s.
Yeah, I mean, this is again a gag that I make with people I know who've seen the film, where I've probably made it about The Force Awakens or something like that, where, you know, what would the tagline be of a superfluous sequel to a film? It would be like The Fast and the Furious 15, The Search for More Money.
Yeah. Yeah, it's again just so insightful and perfect and snappy, and especially when it's parodying franchises like, so you've got the Alien references in there, Star Wars, you know, all the films that got these sequels. Because Planet of the Apes is in there as well, and obviously that has like 1,000,001 sequels.
Yeah.
So no, it's just one of those like little moments it's such a rich gag for a one-liner.
It's one of the ones that stayed with me longest because it always just pops up in my brain, where you just think of, I don't know, they could have used it for Wall Street too. It could have been anything.
Yeah.
In fact, I think they actually had money. Was it what was that one called?
Was it Money Never Sleeps?
That's the one.
Yeah.
Pointless. They've kidnapped the princess, and we get the brilliant scene of Dark Helmet playing with the action figures.
Yes.
And again, there's more jokes in there that were probably wasted on me, where, you know, eventually the princess swoons for Dark Helmet and says, "Your helmet is so big."
Yes. Yeah, that's definitely one that hit me in later life. Like, oh.
And again, going back to the other ongoing gag about I find you strangely attractive. Says, "Of course you do. Jewish..." I nearly fell for that. Druish princesses are often attracted to men with money and power, and I have both.
Yeah.
Obvious, and yet still works.
Yes. Yeah.
The torture scene. Call it that.
Yeah.
Yeah. How to convince a rich man to give up a combination and threaten to give his perfect daughter back her old nose, and there's just a picture of her with this enormous hook.
Yes. I love her reaction as well. Like just the sheer horror of the prospect.
Yeah, and she faints. But
yeah.
Of course, the main gag of this scene is the combination to the airlock.
Yes.
And even though everyone sees it coming quite early,
yeah,
Dark Helmet and Colonel Sanders are sitting there going,
One,
two,
three, four, five.
So the combination is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
That's the stupidest combination I ever heard in my life. That's the kind of thing an idiot would have on his luggage.
And it still takes a moment for it to click with them, doesn't it? Like, oh, that's what it is.
They have to read it back. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Yeah.
And then there's just a minor thing where that's the sort of thing an idiot would have on his luggage. And then Scrooge says, "Oh, that's crazy. That's the exact combination on my luggage."
Yeah, and then he's like, "Has someone changed the combination on my luggage?"
One thing I did see, as Lone Star and Bath break into Spaceball City in order to save the princess, there's a bit of a shootout once they've got her out of her cell. And I didn't realise, I should have done years ago, when they capture what they think is they've captured them, and the gag is they've captured their stunt doubles.
Yes.
And I didn't realise it was Stephen Tobolowsky,
yes.
who was the guard.
I know, same. I had that moment today when I recognised him. I never noticed him before. But yeah, again, another perfectly pitched reaction face from him when he realises they're the stunt doubles.
I mean, he's one of these, like, he's probably been in so many things. He'll always be Ned Ryerson from Groundhog Day, but in this, he's just that very camp, sort of officious. I mean, if he was in Star Wars, he would be the Imperial officer. He's perfect.
Yes.
And then the stunt doubles are the princess with the Hitler moustache.
Yeah. I love the expression on all of their faces as well. Just completely relaxed, like, yeah, you got the wrong guys.
Yeah. And then on the way out, she ends up grabbing a gun, and because they singe a bit of her hair.
Yeah.
Because it drives her mad. She kills them all, and yeah, it's quite efficient.
Yeah. Like Rambo, they say, don't they?
Yeah. Now, one of the gags which, at the time, you don't see the payoff coming until quite near the end of the movie. In order to take the air out of Druidia, the spaceship has to turn into a giant maid who resembles the Statue of Liberty.
Yeah.
With a vacuum cleaner.
Yeah.
It's just
it conveniently has a reverse button on it.
Yeah. And when I say it's a vacuum cleaner, it's a huge vacuum purely to suck out oxygen.
Yeah.
And then what do you get when you've got a vacuum cleaner in this sort of film? Just lots of suck jokes.
Yeah.
The three of them chanting suck, suck, suck.
Yeah, it's again crude, effective.
Childish humour, which is exactly why this was one of my favourite films.
Yeah.
And as Lone Star uses the shorts to turn it back to reverse, it's just, again, she's gone from suck to blow.
Yeah. And the devastation.
Oh, wasted on young me, but
yeah.
Yeah, I'm not
we got
young.
there eventually, both of us.
Yeah, we're not young anymore.
No.
I'll speak for myself, but
Oh no, definitely encroaching not young.
This is a Star Wars thing, you know. They enter the maid's ear to find the self-destruct button, and of course we have to have the ultimate conflict between Lone Star and Dark Helmet in a locker room, which just happens to have the ship's self-destruct button in it.
Yes, of course, as you do.
As a lightsaber fight, when you compare it to, I suppose, the original lightsaber fight in the original Star Wars film, it's actually probably better.
Yes.
Bear in mind, in the original Star Wars, you've got Alec Guinness and Darth Vader looking like two old men poking each other with sticks. This actually gets quite acrobatic at some points.
Yes, it does. Yeah, because Bill Pullman does a backflip at one point, doesn't he? Oh,
yeah.
Bill Pullman stunt double, most likely.
I think if you close up, it very much was Bill Pullman's stunt double.
And one of my favourite gags is when they get tangled up. And the lightsabers get wrapped together, and they're like, "Oh, I'll put my leg there, and then you push."
And they kill one of the cameramen, and
yeah.
I mean, it's just so silly. It's, you know, again, there's not much subtlety when it comes to the lightsaber is penis gag. It's you know, let's hold them by our crotches and measure them.
Yeah. Yours the same size as mine.
One of my favourite bits of this fight was just the bit where, and I don't know how, you know, I suppose you shouldn't try and apply logic to these films, when Lone Star's trying to hit Dark Helmet with a lightsaber and it's just not doing anything.
Yeah.
So Dark Helmet lifts his helmet, starts laughing at him, so just punches him in the face.
Yeah. Which feels like an Indiana Jones knot, I think. Or it certainly read that way to me, with the fancy work, and then just, no, I'm just going to hit him.
Yeah, punch him in the face.
Yeah.
And it was holding him at arm's length while he's just swinging the lightsaber.
Yeah, again, just so childish.
Yeah.
Poor Rick Moranis.
Oh, hero. But then the bit where, of course, because the lightsabers in this are based in a ring, and Dark Helmet, just in going to shake his hand, just takes the ring off it and chucks it down a vent.
Yeah. Yeah, and then you have the whole bit like, no, it was never the ring, it was you.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, Mel Brooks'
really
voice in your ear.
Yeah. But I think, like, what strikes me about that lightsaber fight, and sort of, is the affection for the material they're parodying.
Yeah.
And I think that's why Brooks is so successful at his spoofs, is because he genuinely loves the films he's taking the mick out of. And clearly had an absolute blast, like, finding all the ways he could emulate Star Wars whilst also, like, ripping it apart. And the lightsaber fight, yeah, for me is like the perfect encapsulation of that, with all its silliness, but it's actually still a proper fight.
Yeah, Because I mean, at its heart, I mean, Star Wars is essentially an adventure film, and where they're knights and all this, the lightsabers and the sci-fi element is just the or the then modern retelling of it. It's just a classic sort of heroes and villains tale, except, and with this, it's pretty much the same thing, except you've got the similar effects, but just again, as you say, the affection that's there. It's the gags made are the sort of ones that you could, wouldn't necessarily get away with it. They are childish, they are silly, they are stupid, but together they work really, really well.
Yeah, and because it's all on that sort of clever silliness as well. There's clearly a lot of thought gone into things like Colonel Sanders and Mr. Radar. They're very silly, but they're also meticulously constructed within the sort of the wider framework of the Star Wars parody.
Yeah, I mean, it works in a way that when we looked at Airplane on one of the episodes and how Airplane was essentially built on an old film down to the script, and then the jokes were sort of loaded on top. And again, with a parody, that's already kind of built in, and this is so heavily leaning on Star Wars, but it would be quite easy to either put too many jokes on there or get the wrong angle or something like that, and it wouldn't work at all. And yet this, I'll be honest, this is no Airplane, but it's a very, very good rival.
Yes. No, I agree. I think I don't think it has quite as many jokes that land as Airplane, purely because I don't think you can go about 20 seconds without laughing at something in Airplane. Yeah. And there are definitely sort of ropey bits around the edges in Spaceballs, but it is that sort of, it has such a solid framework on which to build that you can kind of get away with doing the ridiculous things like combing the desert, as well as, a proper lightsaber fight at the end of it where, lightsabers are their penises, all this kind of thing.
We need more of those jokes in film. I mean, films today are so serious.
Yeah, where's all the comedy? Yeah. But I think, like, especially when you talk about spoofs and parodies, I think the big thing that has been lost from that genre is the affection for the material. I think there's a tendency to lean towards the mean in the humour nowadays, whereas I doesn't land for me. It might work for other people, but I much prefer something that's lovingly taking the mick out of a genre rather than just sort of poking holes in it.
Yeah, I mean, we kind of went through that phase, I think, in the, was it the 2000s, when you had the scary movie films.
Yeah.
And I think they started, because I think the first one was a Zucker film.
Was it really?
I think so, yeah. Or at least one of them was heavily involved. And then I lost track of how many sequels that went to. Because I think the first one essentially ripped off Scream.
Yeah.
But then it started this whole genre of epic movie and
Meet the Spartans and
the date movie. I think I didn't see him. I remember seeing him in the video shop. I remember them. And again, they were just kind of, they didn't seem to have that necessarily affection. It was just, how can we get disgusting set pieces in, and how can we get stupid visual gags? And this was, I suppose, as maybe the internet was taking off and they were hoping some of it might have gone viral or whatever.
Yeah,
but, if you base it mostly affectionately, and especially with this, it has such a perfect cast, or pretty much anyway. And most of the other films you later on would either have the odd cameo from probably Charlie Sheen or something like that, and then a bunch of people who either you'd never heard of or probably had been done for something and were trying to find their way back, like Charlie Sheen.
Yep. Yeah, and I think as well, like, particularly with Mel Brooks spoofs, and probably the Zucker ones as well, is that the cast all tend to be on that same sort of level of, they love the material and they love what they're parodying. And I think it really shows. Like, even if you weren't a Star Wars fan, you can see kind of where the love of that comes from within, like, the screenplay for Spaceballs and all the gags that go with it. And it does make a difference. I think it makes for a sort of a nicer, sillier atmosphere when watching a film like that.
And I think we kind of lost that. I'll be honest, I've just Googled scary movie, David Zucker directed the third and fourth Scary Movie films.
Oh, wow.
Jesus Christ. It wasn't even the first one.
Oh.
Blimey.
Oh dear.
Well, he's still alive. He's still got time to turn it around. Yes.
You can do it.
So we get the dark helmet set off the self-destruct button by essentially he got the laser in his balls.
Yes.
So his helmet set the button off. So we got the panic escape mode. The scene with the escape pods, which I saw was actually footage from the first Star Wars film.
Yes, and I noticed it this time. I was like, it really clicked.
I always thought, that looks familiar. Oh no, it is the same.
Yeah, it's literally the same thing.
I suppose it must be handy if George Lucas says, "You may use that." That's fine.
Yes, yeah. Definitely have him on side for these things.
And then you've got the whole thing with the bearded lady and the bear, and it all just gets really silly.
Yeah, and I love the fact that it calls back to the earlier the go to plaid sequence where they say close all the shops and close down the circus, because you've got all the circus performers running around panicking, and then the bearded lady.
And as the Winnebago escapes, Spaceball 1 explodes other than the head and the handle of the vacuum cleaner. They find that Pizza the Hut has locked himself in his limo and eaten himself to death.
Yeah.
I
still think Vinny was involved.
Oh yeah. Guilty party. And the news clips, this goes back, our review of Rocky 5000.
Yeah.
And I mean, this is obviously prescient because, this would have been before Rocky 5. So they'd only had, I'll say only 4 Rocky movies at the time. And I think at the time of recording we're at, 8, if you count the other 2?
Yes, I believe so. Yeah.
Getting there.
And there's earlier on, in terms of prescience, there's the Disneyland gag as well, isn't there?
Oh, yeah.
When Lone Star's like, we're in Disneyland? Which I found very amusing watching it in the context of Star Wars being owned by Disney now.
Yes. To be fair, I think everything's owned by Disney now.
Very true.
And, if Disney would like to buy this podcast, I'm very much for sale. They drop the princess back at Druidia, and one of the gags that gets replayed an awful lot, the diner scene.
Yes.
Where, if you look very carefully, the Millennium Falcon is part there.
Yes, it is.
And they Barth and Lone Star order something until they realise that another party further down the line, including one Mr. John Hurt, is also there. And what I only realised recently were what very much looked like the badges of the Nostromo from the Alien movie. So, I think... Yeah, that's the chest burster scene happens, and he's oh no, not again.
Yes, and it's so wearily delivered. It's just, here we go. No, I love that moment. I think that's one of the ones that because I saw Spaceballs before I saw Alien.
Yeah, same.
So it never landed for me in the same way. And then once I'd seen Alien and went back to watch Spaceballs, it's probably my favourite gag in the movie of all of them, I think.
The alien sings and...
Yes. Yeah, with his cane and his top hat.
It's as ridiculous as it sounds.
Yep.
Yes.
Oh, no. Not again.
Baby, my heart's on fire. If you refuse me, honey, you lose me. Then you'll be left alone. Oh, baby, telephone and tell me I'm your own.
We take 2 of the wedding, the Princess Vesper and the easy gag of Princess Valium.
The narcoleptic.
Yes. Barth opens the fortune cookie, and we find out that the medallion that Lone Star has, because he doesn't know who his parents are. We skipped over that whole bit.
We did, didn't we?
Yeah,
it's only really important now.
Yeah. He has a medallion, doesn't know what it says. It turns out that he is a prince.
Conveniently.
Obviously. So they use the conveniently left liquid Schwartz for their caravan to make it all the way back to the wedding, just in time for him to turn up in a very nice white jumpsuit.
Yeah, I want to know where he got that from, because that can't have been in the Winnebago.
Yeah, and he was in such a hurry to get there. I doubt the local Moss Bros was outside setting them.
Yeah, with epaulets and everything. Yeah, it's quite something.
And Bath's had an embroidered patch on it, didn't it? Unless he'd taken that from his work coverall.
Yeah.
Yes. Ah, dear. So they end up together. They get married. And pretty much the final gag is the Spaceballs land on the planet with the sort of Statue of Liberty head.
Yep. On the beach.
At the Planet of the Apes. Yes.
Yeah, there goes the planet.
Again, it's where they say, "Oh shit."
Yeah.
I saw one of the trivia bits on IMDb. Was it Michael York?
Yeah.
Who was in the original Planet of the Apes? Spent so much effort trying to say this wasn't him, that he just gave up in the end.
Yeah.
I mean,
it's been credited him like everywhere, hasn't it?
Yeah. I mean, I listened to it. I mean, it doesn't sound like him at all, but
no, it doesn't.
I suppose he'd only be worried if he got paid for it, but then I mean, what can he say? Was he in all three Austin Powers films?
Yeah.
So yeah,
I think so. Yeah, Basil Exposition, wasn't it?
Yes. So I don't know what the problem is.
Yeah, I'm sure he's fine.
He survived. So anyway, that was Spaceballs.
Yes.
Thank you. What a treat.
David. Thank you for having me.
No, and we probably missed about 2/3 of the gags just in our going through it. But
definitely. Well, people can discover it for themselves if they decide to partake.
Yeah. And one thing I did, I mean, if I had more time, I'd have gone through, because I've got the version that's on iTunes at the moment, and it has got all sorts on there. There's documentaries. There's a Mel Brooks director's commentary.
I need this.
Yeah,
I haven't got this version. I've just got an old DVD.
There's a making of documentary. There's various clips and spoofs and bits. And one thing I did watch, because it doesn't take very long, is it goes through the entirety of the movie in ludicrous speed.
That's amazing.
It is exactly how you think. They fast forward the movie, and I think it takes about 35 seconds.
That is brilliant. I love it.
I did watch that. I tried to rip it off my laptop and put it on Twitter, but they obviously are aware of these things and won't allow such nonsense. But if you do get a chance, I mean, I think I got it for £2 or £3 a couple of months ago. So if anyone's out there and can get it, they might be on YouTube or something like that. But yeah, definitely dig these out. And those documentaries, I hope one day I have the time to sit down and watch them. I know this is something that rages on the arguments about digital and physical media and all this stuff, but if they're going to put these extras on there, it'd be nice to actually sit down and watch them.
Yes, absolutely. I love a good extra. I'll have to dig this version out so I can have an afternoon of just Spaceballs documentaries. It'd be brilliant.
Yeah, and the commentary, an afternoon of Mel Brooks talking about Spaceballs for an hour and a half.
Ideal.
Yes. I need to go. I might go and watch that now. Anyway, Becky, thank you for bringing your copy of Spaceballs, the movie, from Mr. Rental. Now, where can we find you and your various film writings?
Yeah, so I'm on Twitter. It's Becky Grace Lee, and Lee is spelled Lea, which is a common mistake, so you can find me there.
We'll link to it.
And I've got my own blog, Great Adaptations, where I look at more serious films than Spaceballs, where I look at how films have been adapted from the books that they're based on, basically. And I'm trying to post on that more regularly, so there will be updates soon.
Yeah, we'll link to those on the show notes of the podcast and on the various plugs on Twitter and Facebook and that, so people can find you. And if they have any Spaceballs related conversation, they can direct it your way.
Absolutely, I'm always ready to talk about Spaceballs.
I say direct it in my way once I've seen the documentaries, because yeah, this is the problem. They fast forward for all that. They don't show the director's commentary at ludicrous speed either.
Oh, I bet that's hilarious. They'd be like a high-pitched chipmunk, wouldn't they?
So as is tradition on this podcast, the number one song when this movie was released in the UK on the 11th of December 1987 was China in Your Hand by T'Pau. As we discussed off air, a classic. Becky, thank you very much again.
Thank you.
I'll speak to you soon.
Don't push too far, your dreams are China in your hand. Don't wish too hard because then they come true and you can't help them. You don't know what you might have set up on yourself. China in your hand.
This episode is brought to you by executive producers Gary West, Fergus Higginson, Keith Foster, Jimmy Fletcher, Mark Drakes, Matt Cunnington, Christian Dees, Andy Elliott, Chris Hopkins, Omar Zambon, Ian Madrell, Catherine Lowe, Mark Makin, Zoltan Vargo, Simon Smith, Matt Lee, and associate producer Chris Oakley. Visit www.patreon.com/Betamax Video Club for more information about bonus episodes, early access and more. Those signing up now will find the first bonus episode, The Hunt for Red October. Don't forget to rate and review the podcast on iTunes, and subscribe and tell all your friends.